The following programming is sponsored by Mark J. Bernstein. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or Beasley Media Group. Entrepreneur, founder, author, and financial advisor Mark Bernstein helps high-performing business owners turn their visions into reality. Through his innovative work and the Forward Focus Forums, Mark connects entrepreneurs to resources that fuel their success. Founders Forum is a radio show and podcast where entrepreneurs share their journeys, revealing the lessons they've learned and the stories behind their success. Join Mark and his guests for a mix of inspiration, valuable insights, and a little fun. Now, let's dive in.
Should I? Should I? That's the song. Anyway, that's a song called Should I from the album by Frets, Bridges, and Skins. It's called Like Herding Cats. And that's an album that I produced with my band during the pandemic. So I don't think I've ever really talked about that on the air, but I thought it was appropriate because should I is a big question. I think that we all go through every day, every decision we make, and this is a show for entrepreneurs. And it's we have Sean Dawes in the studio, who was our last guest on the show, and we were talking a little bit about motivation and how people are making decisions constantly. In fact, let's make this the topic of the day because we were talking about how do you control your motivation? And I did some recent listening to a podcast that basically said you don't, because everything you do is motivated by you. It's just you may not be aware of how you're motivated. And so stepping back and thinking about your motivation and why you did certain things and having you assess that might help you in terms of, do I continue to go in this direction? Should I, or should I go in this direction? And Sean, have you say a word, then I'm going to introduce Justin and have him talk a little bit about that. But no, just about this whole idea of, we talked a little bit about Nike on the last show and just doing it. How do you see motivation in terms of your actions on a daily basis as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think, oftentimes even comparing outside of business, but even to just exercising at the gym, oftentimes people say some days you just don't want to do it, but you have to find what your why is and why you're doing it. And I think for me, obviously, like I mentioned in the last conversation, having children, oftentimes when you become a parent, that becomes your why. You're getting up, you're pushing through those challenges, whether it's in business or in life, because of those very reasons. So I think it's crucial to find that inner motivation.
So when you become a parent, it becomes a parent, which is maybe that's where that word came from when you think about it. But anyway, so Justin Wineburgh's here. I'll introduce him formally in a minute. But Justin, what do you think about that? You're an entrepreneur having to make, on the way in, we were talking about all your different departments and everything that's going on, and there's a lot of decisions that have to be made in almost every minute, I would think.
Yes, sure, and thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
For me, the motivator is pretty clear, and I agree with Sean. But and I've said this before: my greatest motivation, fear, absolutely petrified, and that fear gets channeled into motivation. From the second I open my eyes in the morning, it's the fear of not just failing myself, but also failing the people who rely upon me.
Yep. So I think that's great. I think it's great that you understand what your motivation is. I think a lot of people don't understand what's motivating them. I hate to call it positively and negatively, but the things you do and the things you do, which you don't always necessarily mean to do, or not necessarily taking you in the direction that you want to go in. But with that, let me introduce Justin as president and CEO of Alkemy X. Justin Wineburgh has transformed the 44-year-old company from a Philadelphia post-production studio into a solutions-driven media and entertainment powerhouse with expanding expertise into the industry's hottest sectors. So he's from work on the Emmy-winning series on top streaming platforms to original branded content, connecting viewers with consumers, influencers, and tastemakers. In his 9 years at the helm of Alkemy X, Justin has rejuvenated and established the global company as an award-winning creative partner at the intersection of entertainment, advertising, technology. Under Justin's leadership, I'm reading, so I'm going to change it. He's here with us, so I'm going to call him Justin instead of Wineburgh.
Thank you.
The Alkemy X team has worked on top hit series and films from the Walking Dead franchise on AMC, Amazon Prime's The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, great show, I love that show. Starz Power franchise, HBO's The Gilded Age and Westworld, another great show, and Wednesday on Netflix. They're probably all great shows, but I haven't seen them all. To Academy Award-winning films The Whale and The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, to original unscripted series as TLC's award-winning Dragnificent and Restaurant Impossible on the Food Network, while growing the company's slate of branded production for the likes of Amazon, T-Mobile, Electronic Arts, Hulu, Wayfair, Bud Light, Samsung, and more. Whew. I think we used up half the show in that introduction, but there's a lot there. So, anyway. So welcome, Justin, again. And listen, one of the most interesting parts of your story is when I was introduced to you as actually a lawyer at a major Philadelphia law firm, national law firm, and that's how you spent your career. So tell us how that happened and then how you went from that to what you're doing today. There is a connection, so we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I think I've had an entrepreneurial spirit from my teenage years, if you will. I had a business in college, and
Sean can relate to that as well. We've been talking about that.
Yeah, and
me too.
And I went to law school, practiced law for many, many years. Started when I was 12, as you can tell, and practiced law for 19 years.
The Doogie Howser of entertainment.
Yeah, exactly. And built a media and entertainment practice at a global law firm. The practice and department did not exist at that law firm, but I saw an opportunity because essentially the practice of law, while there are specific industry concepts, it's also a combination of so many varied practices of law and areas of law that already existed, whether it's corporate, intellectual property, tax, real estate, insurance, et cetera.
By the way, I just have to tell you, I knew that law firm early on as a young lawyer because I worked at another firm alongside of them on the MGM fire case way back, which was a big deal.
Sure.
So entertainment definitely wasn't their business, even though it happened to be the MGM hotel.
No, not at all. Yeah. But it's interesting you bring that up because there were all of these entertainment adjacent types of cases that they handled. And I saw that opportunity saying, okay, well, we're doing we were doing that type of work as your example at MGM. MGM has lots of entertainment concepts and entertainment issues. We should be marketing to them. The door is open. We just have to walk through it and ask for that type of work. And that was,
by the way, I didn't realize all that until recently. I was in Las Vegas, went to the Sphere, which was pretty cool. Sphere, it's not called the Sphere. But I stayed in an MGM hotel, Vidara, which I didn't realize was an MGM hotel, and I didn't realize how vast what they do in Las Vegas, aside from, has nothing to do with making movies for the most part. It's amazing,
tremendous.
Yeah.
Anyway, I sort of used that thesis to put together a business plan and say, let's go after this body of clients. And the law firm supported me. I mean, they saw it was a firm that really embraces an entrepreneurial spirit and vision. And I was young, right? And at some point, being young and maybe ignorant can
be an asset.
Can be an asset, right? It's the eyes wide shut,
right?
And I recognized that I had a number of sort of relationships, right? Childhood friends that were in the media and entertainment business that trusted me. And that was kind of the genesis of the law practice.
What kind of work did you do? Was it film related, music related?
It was initially litigation related. One of my best friends from growing up was sued in connection with his production of a pretty significant blockbuster film in Hollywood called The Ring that we're familiar with. And he had asked me to help him. And I utilized the existing infrastructure of my law firm and to defend him and his company. And we, without going into all the boring minutia details of this, it became a 3-year piece of litigation in Los Angeles. So being from Philadelphia, I was going out to LA and spent the better part of these 3 years in LA. meeting people. And we sort of became known because it was a contentious lawsuit, and the case went to trial, and it settled favorably after 2 weeks of trial. Nice. And it was sort of that was kind of the inflection point, because it was this sort of well-covered lawsuit in the industry with a favorable result. And I was kind of there in the middle of having done something once the first time,
right,
but having done it really, really well.
Yeah.
And that sort of started the kind of flame really spreading. Not to go back to your MGM fire analogy.
Right. And I assume, and that was also a litigation case, so I assume more litigation came in, but I also assume that eventually you were doing contractual work and other stuff that wasn't.
100%. Yeah. Because what would happen was it was the litigation of specific producer types of issues, right? It sort of led to the question of, well, why are we in this lawsuit? We have contracts.
Right.
So you sort of back up the train to the very beginning of the station, and you can then become the expert on how to draft these contracts.
And what do you do to prevent future litigation?
You got it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that was kind of the genesis of all of, the very earliest stages. And this was like the mid-2000s, so 2004, 2003. And this was my best friend at the time, and he's passed away, as I said, but that turned into a bunch of other types of matters.
So you came to have a very successful entertainment law practice.
I did.
And then what happened?
So back in 2004/5, my studio now where I work and happen to own, had come to me for legal help. They had an idea for a television show.
Philadelphia-based studio.
Philadelphia-based post-production company that was looking to get into the actual production of content.
Yep.
And they had come to me to help them do that. And it was sort of a unique time in the industry. I was developing some expertise with also representing documentary filmmakers, and unscripted reality TV is basically just a short documentary movie. Right. And they came to me to help them with a reality TV show. And this was at a unique time in the industry. I was involved with some of the early tax incentives around producing TV shows. And I helped them put together what became a really, really successful reality show for the Food Network. And that was kind of my first touch with what was called Shooters at the time, that had been founded in 1981. And I helped them over the ensuing years thereafter with this piece of content with Restaurant Dinner Impossible. It started as, and then became Restaurant Impossible.
Yep.
And that show lasted for 13 seasons. And all the while, I was helping them sort of expand into some other areas of the industry, helping them grow, or helping them try to grow, as the case may be. And that was their path. The industry, and by that I mean the advertising industry, went through a pretty big correction in 2012. And that was sort of the first kind of crack.
Was that a big writer's strike year?
Well, that was earlier.
That was earlier.
But yeah, this is the advertising side.
Gotcha.
And that was kind of the sort of crack in the company, right? The Restaurant Impossible and so many of the company's other divisions were doing really well because of these tax credits. But it was kind of like a dying fruit on the vine, because we know these shows come to an end. And come 2013, that was what happened. And the company was having some significant trouble. By 2015, the company was on the verge of really going out of business. The shareholders at the time had come to me and asked what was going on in the business, and I gave them my thoughts on the problems and the challenges. And it was typical, entrepreneur stuff. Raise the bridge, lower the water. Not enough clients, not enough business, out of control expenses. And there was problems. They had a bank. The bank wasn't impressed by how they were running the company and how the business was being pushed forward, and they looked at me and said, well, do you want to come in and run the business, take over as CEO? I was like, absolutely not. Right. Like, don't put me on the Titanic inches from the iceberg.
Right.
So that was kind of the, and this was.
Sounds like a joke, Wineburgh on the iceberg.
Exactly. Right. Weinberg's staying off this iceberg.
Yeah, right.
So this was like late 2015. And by that point, they had changed the name of the company from Shooters to Alkemy X. It's kind of like what you see when restaurants are having trouble. All they do is they change the sign.
Rebrand.
Right. It's just a rebrand. And let's see if that works.
Right. So,
and that's kind of what they had done.
We have to take a break in a second, but what changed that convinced you to take over?
It was the Thanksgiving break, 2015. And I went home and basically thought, you know what? What's the worst that can happen? I know what I know. I don't know what I don't know, but let me go learn a heck of a lot about a lot of things I don't know.
The entrepreneur in you took over.
I didn't even know it was in there, but it really did take over and said, you know what? I think I'm as good as I say I am, but let me go try and prove it.
Well, we're going to hear more about this right after our break.
The Sattel Institute is the leading CEO member organization dedicated to corporate social responsibility. Under the vision and leadership of its founder, entrepreneur and philanthropist Ed Sattel, the Institute brings together CEOs in Philadelphia and other cities to support the nonprofit organizations that do heroic work in our communities. The Sattel Institute believes that community is every leader's business. SI's members-only meetings and private CEO conferences give members the opportunity to hear from world-class thought leaders on crucial topics like AI, education, corporate philanthropy, and more. In addition, CEO members get the opportunity to share ideas and experience with their peers, like-minded CEOs who believe in the importance of giving back to the community and who understand the benefits companies get from embracing corporate social responsibility. The Sattel Institute charges no dues or fees. In order to join, member companies simply make a long-term commitment to the nonprofit of their choice. To find out more about membership and why so many leading companies are now part of the Sattel Institute, visit the organization's website at sattelinstitute.org. Sattel, S-A-T-E-L-L, institute.org. As Ed Sattel says, think we, not just me.
We're back on WWDB AM in Philadelphia, and you're probably listening to us on podcast. And by the way, we just had an ad from the Sattel Institute, great organization, which is how Justin and I met. So back to your story. So there you were, you took the plunge, and then what happened?
So it was really this perfect confluence of an entrepreneurial spirit, business acumen, and knowledge of at least what I thought was knowledge of the media and entertainment business, with this fundamental kind of attorney backdrop. And, I looked at the opportunity to become the CEO, the actual head of the company. Yeah. I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't going to be their general counsel. I wasn't going to be sort of siloed into one particular area, just working for someone else. And it's an unusual career opportunity to be able to go from a law firm as a partner and have a successful career to become the actual chief executive of a going concern. Putting aside for a moment the viability of the going concern at the time. And that was kind of the impetus here, right? It was one of those major life inflection points to take an entrepreneurial risk in a really challenged environment, and a really strong way to give a parent a heart attack. Right? When I walked away from a law career, I thought I was going to kill my mom.
I understand that. Well, I'm another guy who walked away from a law career to do what? That was the question I got. But, anyway.
Yeah, exactly. You guys do what? What's this company do?
Yep.
So I started kind of the transition in January of 2016 and full-time started as the president and CEO on February 1st of 2016. So we're coming up on 9 years.
Do the current shareholders still own the company?
They do not.
They do not.
They all exited the business in 2018. So I'm now the sole shareholder of the company.
I thought so. I just wanted to confirm
Yes.
that. So now you're much more than the CEO. You're the owner. You're the guy that, all the buck stops here kind of guy.
Yeah, and I think that was really important as part of the entrepreneurial kind of turnaround story of the company, not only to our external stakeholders and the people that do business with the company, but also with the people who work at the company, right? My colleagues every day, right? That I believe so strongly in the mission of the company, in the mission of what we're doing, and in our success, that I went all in, right? I took out the other shareholders. I streamlined the operation. I got rid of the chatter. And I believe so much, right? This isn't me, right? I don't make content, right? I believe so much in the people and in the team and in our mission and what we do and what we bring. And as Sean said, the why we're doing it.
Do you, and I assume a lot of the employees are still there, many of them, or?
Oh yeah. We have employees that are, right. And I hate the word employees, but I have colleagues that work with me that have been there for 26, 27 years, some of them. You know?
Gotcha.
We have people that are approaching retirement age.
I would imagine you had to do some adjustments to company culture coming out of what the company came out of, I would think.
Big time adjustments in company culture. And where I want everyone to be empowered to solve problems, right? That's sort of the biggest thing, is that I can help people, I can open the door, but I want everyone there to feel empowered to do their best to solve problems.
In effect, they're your stakeholders, if not shareholders, they're your stakeholders in the company.
Sure.
And it seems to be going well. I know the company's robust in terms of there's lots of business there. Listen, we started a turnaround in 2016. Right. And we were well on our way, and 2020 was going to be our year. Right. It took me a few years. I was ready to go, and 2020 was our year. And then, of course, we all know what happened in 2020, and putting aside, obviously, all the tragedy and illness and everything else, it kind of was almost good to some extent for the company for a whole host of reasons. Most importantly was that I was working on a turnaround on a company that was in bad shape, and instantly overnight, every other company in the world was in bad shape with me. Right. Put you on an equal footing.
Right. So that was kind of good. And then it to some extent, right. And it gave us 2020, 2021 was wiped out. 2022 was going to be our year. And I had to work on some operational issues. And then 2023, we were ready to go. And then, of course, right after the pandemic, all of Hollywood decided to go on strike.
Time flies by quickly on this, so I want to get to your future vision. But along with that, I want to ask you about how you handle challenges. So, if this were 3 years from today, Justin, so it's November of 2027, and you and I are talking, we're looking back on the last 3 years. What would have to happen in your business, and I'm going to say in your life, because we were talking earlier, it's all intertwined, right?
Sure.
So what does that look like 3 years from now?
I am now really singularly focused on stability. Having been through the pandemic and those challenges, having been through the strikes, there were actually 4 concurrent labor disputes over the past 2 years. I've made such changes in the business, in the cost of the business, in the overhead structure of the company, to set it up for long-term stability, right? In any business, there's always going to be vagaries of clients, right? You're always going to have revenue ups and downs. And I've kind of put in place a structure that we will weather that storm no matter what. And then I've also positioned the company for essentially unlimited scale. Right, we now live in a global world to some extent, thanks to the pandemic, with remote work, hybrid work in large respects, which basically, in my mind, means that I have unlimited capacity for people and unlimited scale, and I've positioned the company that way.
That's great. Well, I was going to ask you, what strengths do you have to overcome any potential storms? But you just answered it. You've built it for that. So
that's where we'll be in 3 years.
That's wonderful.
Scaling.
May I ask you, offline, we were talking about some of the great personal things happening in your life. Do you want to, what does that look like for you over the next 3 years?
Yeah, so I'm going through a significant, profound change, as we talked about. I lost my mother recently, who I was extremely close with, and that's been a devastating and gutting and heartbreaking time in my life. And then shortly thereafter, found out that even a little bit later in life, I'm obviously now expecting my first daughter
Amazing.
in a few months. And, I think it's when you talk about things coming full circle, I'm going to go from that moment of profound grief to what I envision being the singular most moment of profound joy that anyone could experience. While I'm saddened by the loss of my mother and her not being there, this is my personal circle of life.
It's I don't have words, to express to you. I know a lot of what you're going through, and it is, but it is the circle of life, and you have nice things to look forward to.
I do. I'm anxious with my wife and I to really go on to this next phase of life together in a time of professional prosperity as well.
Yeah, it sounds great. A couple last questions. If you could speak to your younger self, what advice would you give you, knowing what you know now?
Work really, really hard. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail. But to work really, really hard and do the absolute best you can no matter what. I call it like the 90%ers. I see so many people that are 90%ers and can get 90% of the way there. The artistry lies in that last 10%, getting it into the end zone.
Yep. Justin, what are your thoughts since you're having a child and you've built this business? What are your thoughts about your legacy?
I think it dovetails into my last answer, really, to leave the world a little bit better than however I found it. Touch a life, right? I sort of try and touch lives no matter what I do, and leave them a little bit better than the way I found them. And if other people can do that, and it doesn't take a lot, right? I've taught law school for years and years. I still get emails now from people whose careers have been touched by something I did a decade ago. I see people on the street.
You probably had no idea.
I don't even remember some of these students coming up to me on the street saying, "You touched my life with that class, or with that one lecture, or with what you helped me with." And just to give, it doesn't take a lot, right? It could be one email a day, one phone call, one text, right? Just the tiniest act of kindness can be inspirational to someone, and you don't even know it. And it doesn't take a lot.
Yeah, I agree. And, those kind of random, not necessarily random, but the acts of kindness throughout the day, throughout your week, throughout your life. And that's a great legacy to have. With that, believe it or not, we've run out of time. It went quickly. And we thank you all for listening. Thank you, Justin, for being here. Sean, thank you for being here for the second recording of the show today. And thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week on Founders Forum.
Thanks, Mark.